Good evening, brothers and sisters in the Dhamma. Thank you very much for coming to this evening's forum. I'm very happy to see such a good turnout. I wasn't really expecting anything. I just thought I would conduct this actually for the purpose of recording so that we can spread this through the internet. And originally I was going to record this at home, but I thought, okay, never mind. We'll open it up so that we can have a chance for questions and answers, and I'm sure some of you will benefit from this. As you have all known, this is the Science of Dhamma Forum. Right? That means we are going to talk about how science can explain the teachings of Dhamma, and we're going to use the translations of Bhante Punnaji. So there are some basic ground rules so that we all have a good understanding, and I think there should be no problem with everyone here. Just in case there are people who are not familiar with Bhante's translations, there might be people who come with traditional translations and they will find Bhante's translation not agreeable. The purpose of this forum is not really to argue about whose translation is correct and whose translation is better and so on and so forth. Right? Basically, this is a forum for all of us who are learning from Bhante Punnaji to share the Dhamma based on Bhante's translations and interpretations. So it's hope, in sharing this, I find that I too will learn something from this, and hopefully questions from the floor, I could also learn something from it. So the microphone is there. This is being recorded. So if you have any questions when I'm at the end of the session, please feel free to approach the microphone and raise your question so that we can have it recorded. And at the same time also, when I'm presenting the technical stuff, unless it is something very pressing, hopefully let me finish my presentation before you ask any question. Right? Now we're going to explore the Dhamma from a very modern, scientific and experiential perspective. This is in fact the way Bhante teaches us, that the Dhamma is something that can be understood in the modern context. And it is something which actually is very scientific, and Bhante has used many aspects of science to explain the Dhamma. And as all of you have heard from him, he talks a lot about psychology and neuroscience and medicine and so on to explain the Dhamma. And also very importantly, that Bhante has always taught us to look at the Dhamma from an experiential point of view, because that is really what the Dhamma is. And the key phrase there is ehi pasiko, come and see. But actually that seeing is not just observing, but that seeing is really the experiencing. The only way to understand the Dhamma is really to experience it. And we welcome discussion on different translations because it's very helpful that we look at how other people have translated some of the terms and how Bhante has translated it. And if we can understand from Bhante's point of view, we could actually gain a better understanding. But very importantly, we're not here to debate about traditional translations. We're here to try to understand Bhante's translations. And finally, we're here to share and understand all these interpretations and translations by Bhante. Right? What I'm going to cover this evening, very importantly, is two very important things. First is about Saññā and Vedana. What is Saññā and Vedana? Saññā is traditionally translated as perception, and Vedana is translated as feeling. Sometimes Vedana is also translated as sensation, which is fine, you know. I'll explain later on why Vedana can also be called sensation in a way, but Saññā is definitely not perception the way that Bhante has taught us. So today we're going to take a look at why Saññā is not perception. Saññā is really sensation. What is the difference between perception and sensation? When you touch something, you sense something. That is sensation. That is Saññā. When that sensation reaches your mind and it gets processed and you get an idea of what it is, how it is there, that is perception. So there is a difference. In other words, Saññā is talking about a sensation that has not been processed by the mind. Whereas if it has been processed, it becomes perception. So at the time of occurrence of Saññā, there is no mental processing of that sensation. And I'm going to illustrate today with the use of science. It is quite amazing that the Buddha, 2,600 years ago, explained it in such a way that today scientists are beginning to discover these things. They have only started to realize these finer aspects of how our body work. And then we're going to take a look at another important aspect, which is associated with what is called the 5 aggregates. We're going to take a look at sankhara, right, which is mental construction, sankhara, how the mind constructs these sensations and form perception. So perception is vijnana. Vijnana is when the mind produces the idea that, oh, I have seen something, I have touched something. So the mind has processed the sensation. That is vijnana, perception. And then we then take a look at how it all comes together in the way of the 5 constituents of the process of perception, or what is commonly called the 5 aggregates, Pañca-khandha. And basically, this understanding of Saññā and Vedana is very, very important. It is at the core of many of Bhante's explanations. When Bhante explained about the experience of jhana, arupa samadhi, paticca samuppada, and so on, okay? Okay, before we proceed, ground rule, can you please answer your phone outside if you don't mind and put it on silent mode? Thank you very much. Now, why do I want to be so concerned with Saññā? Very important. This is from, now I'm going to be referring to level 3 book, right, for today. Sometimes I may look at level 2 and others, but the 3 meditation guides by Bhante, level 1, level 2, level 3. So for those of you who have the Buddhist Maha Vihara edition or the Mahinda Rama edition, I have shown the pages there. Pages in blue is the Buddhist Maha Vihara edition. Pages in purple is the Mahinda Rama edition. Right? So you can refer to page 85 on this one or page 84 on this one, where Bhante has translated this very important sutra, that part of the sutra, where he says, if truth is one and no second exists, debates will arise arise among folks. A variety of truths they themselves do form. Gurus, therefore, never speak of one truth. Now, what this phrase really means is that if there is one thing called truth, if there is only one truth, I mean, you can't have 2 truths. If there is really only one truth, then nobody is going to be arguing with each other. There is no need to debate or discuss because that one truth is the only truth. But unfortunately, a lot of different people, teachers, here gurus is referring to samana, the teachers. And gurus here is basically talking about people who are teaching, right? And they have their own version of explanations of realities. So they have their own truth. So it appears like there are many truths. So the first phrase is pointing out that it appears that there are many different truths. Right? There is no one truth. And then in the second phrase, it says, never was there a variety of truths other than sensations always in the world. Creating views using speculative logic, they speak of a duality, falsehood, and truth. So the second phrase basically is referring to there are no different types of truth. And here the Buddha is pointing out, there is only one thing that is a truthful experience, and that is sensation. Then once we experience sensation, what happens is people begin to use their own speculative logic to explain what they have experienced. And that's why they come up with all the different truths. So therefore, they speak of a duality. Some will speak of what is truthful, some will speak of falsehood. Because there are no different truths. The only true experience that cannot be be changed is really sensation. Beyond sensation, the mind begins to corrupt what has been sensed and start to produce our own version of what we call truth from our speculative logic, from the way we think, the way our mind proliferates. This is really what is pointing out. So the key word here is the word Saññā. So what the Buddha pointed out here is very simple. When we experience Saññā, that is the true experience. Beyond the experience of Saññā, then speculative logic comes in. Our own personal interpretations come in. And then we start to distort what has been experienced. Or we start to make up stories. As you know, that the mind likes to make up stories of what has been experienced. This is why it's so important now to take a look at what really is Saññā. Now, in order to begin from this point, then we have to basically look at what is it that we are experiencing in this world. Who are we? You know? So, if we were to ask this simple little question, who are we? And Bhante has always pointed out that we look at it as I am an organism in an environment. And as an organism in an environment, we are interacting with the environment. We are perceiving the environment and we are alive and experiencing the environment. Being alive is because of this process called metabolism. It is a life-sustaining process. And then in being able to experience the environment is because we have 5 physical senses, right? Our eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and the body, enabling us to see, hear, smell, taste, and touch. And that's how we experience the environment through these 5 senses. And when we experience the environment through the senses, we begin to react, right? Or we may respond, right? So we are organisms in an environment, interacting with the environment, reacting to the environment. Now, when that happens, there is this body that is picking up all these sensations. Now, there is a fundamental question. Who or what is experiencing the environment? Is it the body or is it the mind? Right? So I won't answer that question. I'll leave you to think about it. Towards the end, then maybe we can discuss. What is experiencing the environment? Is it the body that is experiencing the environment? Or is it the mind that is experiencing the environment? So, if we look at what happens in the body, basically, we have the central nervous system. The central nervous system is the basic operating system of the body, the system that operates the whole body. And it is made of 2 main parts, spinal cord and the brain. The spinal cord is connected to the peripheral nervous system, and the peripheral nervous system is in turn connected to the various sense organs. The 5 sense organs come through the peripheral nervous system, and the peripheral nervous system then sends messages, picks up these environmental stimulations and sends these messages through nerves to the brain. And these nerves carrying signals to the brain is processed by the brain. And that is the central nervous system. Sensing the environment, carrying signals to the brain, and then the brain processing it. And with the brain having processed the sensations, the brain then gives instructions to the rest of the body to do something, to act, to react or not to react, whatever it is, right? And in the brain itself, they are made of 3 parts. So I'm not going to go so deep into this anymore. Bhante has already talked about this. I'll touch on this maybe at the next couple of forums. Today we're just going to focus on sensations and feelings and the 5 aggregates. So we're going to talk about how the brain processes sensations later on. What is more important is for us to understand that the peripheral nervous system carries these signals from our sense organs through the spinal cord and brings the signals to the brain, and the brain processes it and sends instructions to the rest of the body to operate. So when we experience anything in the environment, very important to realize this is that it depends on necessary conditions. And Bhante has stated it. Every outcome is dependent on the presence of necessary conditions. For us to be able to see, we must have light. When there is no light, we can't see. So light is reflected from an object. Light then acts as a stimulus to the eye sense organ, the eyeball. And light enters the eye, strikes the back of the retina, and then if we're paying attention, then we will have a process of the perception. This process of perception is the Pañca-khandha. And this process of perception gives rise to a mental image of what we have just seen. Right? So we're going to use seeing as a very useful way to explain, right? Saññā, Vedana, Sankhara, Vijnana, and Rupa. These are the 5 aggregates, or the 5 constituents of the process of perception. So in the seeing, it is because light enters the eyeball and light strikes the back of the eyeball, a part of the eyeball called the retina. And when an image is, when light is reflected from an object, there is an image, right, that is produced on the retina. So that image is inverted. In all instances, we have this inverted image. When we see something inside the retina, that image is inverted. Whether it is looking at a tree or looking at someone playing baseball or so on. So a quick look at what is inside the eyeball. I'm a bit worried of saying the wrong thing. We have 2 very experienced ophthalmologists in the room. Okay. Simply put, the lens is the thing that focuses, right, onto the image that is coming in, and the image strikes the back of the retina. And in the middle part, there is a thing called the macula, which is roughly about 5 to 6 millimeter in diameter, right? And in that macula is where the image is sharply focused. Outside the macula, the image is not focused. The macula is an area where in the center of it, there is a part called the fovea, right? And the fovea is the area that contains these optic nerves that is able to pick up very focused color light. Outside the fovea, what it picks up is gray shades of gray, right? Not focused and no color. And all that light-sensitive cells are optic nerves. They come through that entrance there, called the optic nerve entrance here, and that is actually what is commonly called the blind spot. Because at that position, where all the optic nerves and also the blood vessels come through, there are no light-sensitive cells picking up light there. So that is our blind spot. Every one of us has that. So in a way, our eyeball is not very perfect. There are many areas where things can go wrong. The image is focused on this area called the fovea, which is very small. It's only 1 or 2 millimeter in diameter. That's about all there is. Very small. And basically, if we were to look at an image and it gets focused onto this fovea, it is inverted. Not only is it inverted, it is being sensed as pixels. It is not sensed as a whole image. It is sensed as little bits and pieces, pixels. Because when the light falls onto this part, which is highly focused and able to pick up color, it has different nerve fibers, different optic nerves that is able to pick up the different colors. There are 3 kinds of colors that it is picking up. Right? So if we look at it, expand that further, light enters, strikes the fovea, and in that area, there are 2 kinds of light-sensitive cells. Rod cells sense gray, blurry images, and cone cells are the ones that sense specific wavelengths and very sharp. So cone cells are able to pick up sharp images and only within certain wavelengths. So different cone cells can only pick up different range of wavelength. One kind of cone cells will pick up wavelength belonging to the color red, or around the range of red. Another kind of cone cells will pick up in the range of green, and another kind will pick up the range of blue. So in other words, any one cone cell is only able to pick up a frequency range of either the red color, the green color, or the blue color. Now, bear in mind, very importantly, the word color. Color is a mental interpretation of wavelength. What these cone cells are picking up is wavelength. Different wavelength will stimulate a particular cone cell. So, for instance, wavelength in the blue range will only stimulate the blue cone cells. Wavelength in the green range will only stimulate the green cone cells, and wavelength in the red range will stimulate only the red cone cells. The red cone cells will not react to wavelength in the green or blue range. So when each of these kind of cone cells is stimulated, it carries a signal to the brain. Each stimulated cell sends individual impulse to the brain. And within each eyeball, within the area of the retina, there are roughly 120 million cells, cone cells and rod cells, 120 million. And each of these 120 million cells, like sensitive cells, is continuously sending signal to the brain, nerve signals, right? When light stimulates these cells, it creates an electrical impulse that is carried to the brain. So it looks something like that. When we see an image, the reflected image, inverted, strikes the back of the retina, and then these cells are stimulated, and the optic nerves, millions of them, are then carrying the signal to the brain, and basically it is mainly processed in the back, in the visual cortex, which is at the back lobe, right? Occipital lobe. So visual cortex processes it. So this is really what is going on when we see. Now I'm not going to go much more detail. I'm going to show you some videos, right? So basically, this is how we see, and this is actually mentioned by Bhante. On page 62, on both editions, he says, what we call an experience is a mental process of perception and conception that begins at the 5 sense bases and is carried to the brain as the 6th sense through nerve impulses. Though we call it a mental process, it is really a physical activity. Experience, as understood, normally is of 2 kinds: subjective experience and objective experience. Today we're going to focus on these sensations, and we're not going to talk so much about subjective, objective. We'll talk about that at the next sharing. So we're going to focus on this sensation. And Bhante pointed out here in the book very clearly that this is really because of this nerve impulse, and this activity is a physical activity. Here he's referring to the reaction of these light-sensitive cells, the cone and rod cells in the eyeball, and carrying this signal to the brain. That's a physical activity. So this is what Bhante was referring to. And then on page 117 or 124 in the Mahindarama edition, Bhante pointed out that in the case of eye, when we see, it is because the eye is stimulated by light in the environment coming in the form of electromagnetic waves. Right? So in this case, it is light entering the eye and stimulating these nerves, optic nerves. Further on, we take a look at page 118 in the green edition and 125 in the Mahindarama edition. Bhante said that if we consider the sense of sight, what is perceived by the eye is only a visual image, or rupa. Rupa is the visual image that is being perceived in the mind. The image is produced when the body reacts to the stimulus. And so experiences a feeling, Vedana, and a sensation, Saññā. So it's experiencing both. So when light stimulates these light sensitive cells, we experience both at the same time, Saññā and Vedana. Saññā or sensation, Saññā, refers to the color. Here he's actually referring to the wavelength. I think Bhante was keeping it short and he simplified so that we can understand it. Because if he starts talking about wavelength, I think people might get a little bit confused because it might be too scientific. So he just used the word color. So sensation refers to the color, and feeling, Vedana, refers to the pleasantness or unpleasantness of the color. In the case of hearing, and we're going to talk a little bit about hearing later on. So in the case of hearing, sensation refers to the nature of the sound, and feeling refers to the pleasantness and unpleasantness felt in the ear, or in fact in the whole nervous system. Right? So Bhante was specifically talking about the ear, but actually it is felt in the nervous system, because the nervous system is both also the spinal cord as well as the brain. That Vedana is being felt throughout the central nervous system. Sensation is always accompanied by feeling, and so they are inseparable. This is very important. You cannot talk about Saññā without Vedana. You cannot talk about Vedana without Saññā. The two go together. Why? When light stimulates light-sensitive cell, that is a sensation. But at the same time, that sensation can also cause reaction in the central nervous system, in all the optic nerves. Whether it actually soothes the nerves or it irritates the nerves. So there is this reaction to that feeling. That feeling is a sensational feeling. That feeling is not an emotional feeling. It is not whether you like it or don't like it yet. Not yet. When we talk about Vedana, it is not talking about whether you like or don't like the feeling. It is whether the nervous system is being soothed or being irritated by these sensations. So very important. Vedana is not an emotional feeling. I will sometimes elaborate a little bit about other people's translations so that you can understand a little better. There are many people who translate Vedana as an emotional feeling. So you have to be aware. When you read books and they talk about Vedana, it talks about emotions. It is not emotional. That emotion hasn't arisen yet. Vedana will trigger emotion. Vedana is not emotion. Right? This is very important to understand. Moving on. Sensation and the feeling are reactions of the organism to stimulation by the environment. So in other words, it is these nerve fibers that react to the stimulations. Sensation and feeling become the raw material used for construction of mental images by the thinking part of the brain. Now here we have to be very, we have to understand an important point here. The word mental image here, it also applies to the sense of hearing, the sense of touching. Mental image does not necessarily mean a visual image. You see, when you hear a sound, the perception of that sound in your mind, that is a mental image, the image of a sound. When you touch something, you feel it is hard or soft. That is also a kind of mental image. So these are mental images. Mental images does not necessarily mean pictures or videos, not necessarily in the form of pictures or videos, but in the form of realizing that you have sensed something. So that produces a mental image. Scientists, one of the most famous scientists, Antonio Damasio, basically summarized what is the mind. And he was very precise when he said, the mind is made of a continuous flow of mental images arising and falling, right? Arising and fading, continuous, perpetual, endless. Right? So that is precisely what the Buddha was talking about. Continuously arising and fading, and this process of rising, falling is anicca. So there's a bonus for today's sharing. If you could understand today's sharing about Saññā Vedana, the rising and falling, you don't even need to meditate on vipassana. This understanding is vipassana. Right? So now I'm going to show you what the scientists are saying about this sensation. Now we're still using sense of sight, right? So sensation of seeing color.
Some scientists claim the simple act of seeing a color triggers a spontaneous reaction in the nervous system. This is automatic. It isn't caused by any association, but by the wavelength of the color. Objects reflect light at different wavelengths. Our brain interprets these wavelengths as different colors, from blue, the shortest wavelength, through green and yellow, to red, the longest. The long wavelengths, the reds and oranges, are said to arouse the nervous system. Heart rate and blood pressure increase. The short wavelengths, the blues and violets, are meant to relax the nervous system.
Let's take a look at what is being said. Right? The scientist basically said, the simple act of seeing a color triggers a spontaneous reaction in the central nervous system. This is automatic. It isn't caused by any association but by the wavelength of the color. Now, we'll stop there and take a look at it again. The simple act of seeing a color triggers a spontaneous reaction in the central nervous system. What is this reaction? Saññā and Vedana. That is the reaction. Right? This is automatic. That means we can't even control it. We can't start it, we can't stop it. It happens. As soon as light enters the eye and strikes the retina, there is Saññā Vedana being stimulated, being produced. Right? Because of the reaction of the light-sensitive nerve cells. And this is not caused by any association. Now the word association here is referring to our emotions. When we see, hear, smell, taste, and touch something, the mind recalls it is what is it that we have seen, heard, smelled, taste, and touch. That is association, because we always remember things by association, or what Bhante calls categorization, categorized memory. Categorization is association. We associate. Give you an example. What is this? Everybody would basically say, oh, this is a bottle of mineral water. Why would you say this is a bottle of mineral water? How about this? This is also a bottle of mineral water. But these two are different bottles. Why do you call it a bottle of mineral water? Because you group the two in the same category. Categorized. And that categorization basically is an association. You associate this with a category of mineral water. You associate this with a category of mineral water. Right? So these are all associations. So this association happens after the signal has gone to the brain and being processed. It doesn't happen at the time the stimulation occurs. Saññā and Vedana happens at the time stimulation occurs, not when it has reached the brain and being processed. And this reaction, the spontaneous reaction, is caused by the wavelength. So depending on the wavelength, right? Objects reflect light at different wavelengths. And our brain interprets these wavelengths as different colors. That's what it is. Color doesn't exist out there. There is no technically speaking, there is nothing called color. Color doesn't exist. Color is the brain's interpretation of wavelength that is being picked up. Right? So there is no color out there, so to speak. So objects reflect light at different wavelengths, and our brain interprets these wavelengths as different colors. Blue, which is the shortest wavelength. Now, wavelength is basically talking about the length of one cycle, right? That is the wavelength. One cycle of the light frequency. So how many cycles in 1 second is the frequency? So short wavelength means high frequency. Long wavelength means low frequency. Right? That's how it simply works. Right? For those of you who understand science, you appreciate what I'm saying. So basically, right, the short wavelength, which is high frequency light, is blue and green. Right? And then the low frequency light, the long wavelengths, are the red and the oranges. So the long wavelengths, the red and oranges, are said to arouse the nervous system. Arouse here means agitate, right? Causing a reaction, agitating. And it causes the heart rate to go up and blood pressure to increase. And the short wavelength, which is basically the high frequency light, are meant to relax the nervous system. So this irritating the nervous system, that is Vedana. This relaxing the nervous system, that is Vedana. Pleasant Vedana and unpleasant Vedana. So now I hope you understand the difference between Saññā and Vedana. Saññā is picking up the sensations of the different wavelengths, and Vedana is whether these wavelengths irritate the nervous system. So here, for the sense of sight, this is how it works. I'm going to show you that video again so you can appreciate now. The second time you watch it, you probably appreciate what is being said and observe the words and understand that what it is trying to say.
Some scientists claim the simple act of seeing a colour triggers a spontaneous reaction in the nervous system. This is automatic. It isn't caused by any association, but by the wavelength of the colour. Objects reflect light at different wavelengths. Our brain interprets these wavelengths as different colours, from blue, the shortest wavelength, through green and yellow, to red, the longest. The long wavelengths, the reds and oranges, are said to arouse the nervous system. Heart rate and blood pressure increase. The short wavelengths, the blues and violets, are meant to relax the nervous system.
So I hope now you have an appreciation of Saññā and Vedana in the sense of seeing. Now let's go a little bit further and see what happens next. As I pointed out to you, all these different light-sensitive cells are sensitive to only specific range of wavelength. So in the case of looking at an image, we are really looking at pixels. We are not looking at the full image. Right? Each light-sensitive cell is picking up only one tiny little pixel. Imagine 100 million light-sensitive cells crammed in a small area which is roughly 5 millimeter in diameter, right, in the macula. That's all there is. 120 million light-sensitive cells are there. So that is how many pixels is being picked up in that small little area. So these light-sensitive cells pick up various frequency range of light. We have rod cells. Rod cells are the gray one. They are also found outside the macula area, but they're not so many. They're very blurry. They cannot focus. Right? So the rod cells are the ones that sense gray, blurry images. So what it's picking up is very gray and blurry, whereas the colored ones, the cone cells, are the ones that pick up sharp colored images. Right? So you can appreciate that at any instant in time, 120 million sensations, Saññā, impulses, are being picked up and sent to the brain. But it is not like a one-time thing. It is continuously. Right? Light is being interpreted in two ways. Some people say light can be explained in terms of light particle, photons. Light can also be explained in terms of electromagnetic radiation, which is a light frequency. Right? So this radiation will continuously strike the retina continuously. With each striking, one set of sensation goes to the brain. The impulse rises and goes to the brain. The next striking, impulse. So at any one moment, any 1 second, millions and millions of striking is happening. Each striking carries 120 million to the brain, and there's, let's say, hundreds of millions of striking each second. And that is one eyeball. How about the other eyeball? So imagine how much Saññā, impulses, are being picked up and carried to the brain. Billions and billions and billions. Can't even count, right? And the brain is not able to process all of it. I will explain in a future forum how the brain tries to process and discards away information. So the brain is not very reliable. It cannot handle all that. So there is a way of discarding information. We'll talk about it next time. So what happens when these sensitive sensations are being picked up, right? So we use the Pañca-khandha to explain the 5 aggregates, or what Bhante calls now the 5 constituents of the process of perception. And Bhante points out it is Vedana and Saññā, feeling and sensation, and then Sankhara, which is mental construction, and then Vijnana, which is the perception, and finally the mental image arising as Rupa in the mind. So we have briefly touched on Saññā and Vedana. So I hope the concept of Saññā and Vedana is clear to many of you. So now we're going to take a look a little bit further, right? Sense stimulation, when we talk about other senses. Now I'll talk a little bit of other senses to help you understand better. So when we talk about seeing or sight, then it's reflected light stimulating cone and rod cells. When we talk about hearing, then it is air vibrations stimulating eardrum. And when we talk about touching, it is actually sensing. Now touch, we don't touch an object. Each touch receptor under the skin, again, there are millions of touch receptors under the skin. When you come into contact with a physical object with your hand, millions of receptors, touch receptors are being stimulated. Some are picking up pressure. Some are picking up temperature. Some are picking up vibrations. Some are picking up chemical reaction. Some are even picking up pain, right? So that is touch. Smell, similarly, smell is because of odorant molecules entering your nose and striking at these receptors in the olfactory bulb, binding with them, and then the sensation of smell is picked up. And similarly with taste, flavor molecules react chemically, chemical reaction in the tongue, right? With this gustatory sense receptors in the tongue, in the taste buds. So basically, stimulation of these nerve cells, stimulation trigger Saññā and arouse Vedana in the nervous system. That's really what it is. So Saññā, Vedana. We're going to take a quick look at hearing and touch in a moment. So Saññā and Vedana, now we talk about Sankhara. Billions of these Saññā, Vedana go to the brain and then they get constructed. And Bhante points out this is mental construction. Now, this word Sankhara, I want to point out very clearly, a number of people translate it to mean karmic construction, volitional construction. Right? Bhante points out this is not volitional construction. Karma is not constructed at this point in time. This is purely a mental construction. Karmic construction is a different thing. Karmic construction comes after the mind begins to process what has been sensed. Right? And one theory supports that is very simple. Even when you become an arahant, you can still sense Saññā, Vedana. You can see. If you can't sense Saññā, Vedana, you can't see. So even an arahant will sense Saññā, Vedana. Now if an arahant can sense Saññā, Vedana, and if Sankhara is karmic construction, that means arahants are also constructing karma? That doesn't make sense. The Buddha pointed out, arahants are free from constructing karma. Therefore, that simply means Sankhara is not karmic construction. Right? So let's take a look at what is Sankhara from a scientific perspective. Bhante calls it very simply mental construction. Now I'm going to show you what is this mental construction from the field of neurology or ophthalmology specifically.
As our eyes dart around, we make sure that anything interesting is lined up on our sharp spot so we get a good look at it. And you don't know you're doing it because the brain takes these jerky snapshots and creates a nice smooth movie of the world.
So I hope that explains what is sankhara, construction. How this is being put together, because it's picking up bits and pieces of sharp color images only in a very small little focal point, right? So if you look at it, this is the blind spot, and this is the fovea part, and it is picking up very sharp color images, right? Many dots, many bits and pieces, many pixels. And then at the next instant, because the eye is darting around, the eye is never fixed. Your eyeball is never fixed. It's constantly darting around in very small little motions that you don't realize. So now it picks up the next position, and then the next position, and it is able to put it all together to form the complete picture. Forming the complete picture is vijnana. The process of forming it is construction, and that is sankhara. So sankhara is the process of construction, and vijnana is the big picture. Vijnana is the big picture of what has been formed. Now you see objects. Vijnana is a collection of objects you see. So Saññā is not object. Saññā is just a pixel, one of the millions of pixels in a small portion of the object. It is all constructed. So I hope you understand now the sense of sight, how this construction comes about. Hearing is basically, now again, it's very important. One word I would like to point out that is being mistranslated. The word rupa. What is the word rupa? A lot of people translate the word rupa as corporeality, materiality, matter. No. We know from our own Bahasa Malaysia that rupa, you see, Bahasa Malaysia is derived from Sanskrit. Some words are derived from Sanskrit. Rupa is appearance or mental image. Rupa is not object, physical object, materiality, corporeality, matter. That is not rupa. So when you see, are you seeing objects? No. What are you seeing? You are seeing light reflected from the object. The light that is reflected from the object entering your eyeball, placing an image at the back of your retina, that is rupa. The rupa is that image that is being picked up by light reflected from the object. Now the same thing with hearing. When you say, oh, if somebody is playing the piano, I hear the piano. Are you hearing the piano? Is the piano entering your ear? If you say, I hear the piano, what are you hearing? You're hearing the piano is entering your ear. It's just like I see the dog. If you say you're seeing the dog, that means the dog has entered your eyeball? No, you see an image of the dog. So you're seeing a rupa of the dog. So what is rupa? Rupa is an image, not the object. So now you hear someone playing the piano. So you hear notes, you hear music. What is the rupa, right? So that is really the image. So when somebody plays the piano, what has happened? The person press a note on the keyboard, and there is a hammer that strikes on the string, and the string vibrates, and the string vibrates, causes vibration on a soundboard, and that soundboard transmits that vibration to the air and causes vibration in the air. This air vibration, right, they come into your ear and then enter the ear canal here, and it strikes the eardrum, the tympanic membrane, the eardrum, and causes vibration in the eardrum. That vibration in the eardrum in turn vibrates three bones called the ossicles. These are a collection of three bones here, ossicles. These three bones in turn vibrate. In fact, they amplify the vibration. The amplification of this vibration then causes a vibration in the cochlea. And that cochlea is filled with two things. It's filled with fluid inside, and it is also filled with vibration-sensitive hair at the end of auditory nerves, nerve cells. So the end of these auditory nerve cells are vibration-sensitive hair inside the cochlea, which moves or vibrates according to the vibration of the liquid inside the cochlea. And then this vibration causes stimulation of the auditory nerves, carrying that signal to the brain. So now, again, millions and millions of this signal is going to the brain and being constructed and produce the mental image of a sound that you have just heard. When somebody plays a note, middle C, and then that sound appears in your mind because that is all put together, right? So this construction is also happening in the similar manner in hearing. Right? So there are millions and millions of these vibration-sensitive auditory nerves inside the cochlea. At the end of it is the hair, and it's the movement of the hair. Now, one thing very important, as we age, and very quickly, and this is not waiting until we're old, by the time you're 35, you start to 30 even, you start to lose your hearing. And by the time you're 40, you can only hear a limited range, and by the time you're 60, you cannot even hear above 10,000 hertz. 10,000 normal kids, children, teenagers can hear up to 18,000 hertz, 18,000 cycles a second. Right? 30 or 40-year-old can only hear up to 12,000 hertz per second. 50, 60-year-old cannot hear anything close to 10,000. And by the time you're 70, 80 years old, you probably can only hear up to 9,000, 8,000 hertz sound. Higher than that you can't. I'm going to test you. Next sharing, I'm going to bring those sound waves and play them. And these sound waves, I will see who reacts and who can hear it, and then we'll know. I can actually guess your age by looking at the way you react to these sound waves. So this cochlea weakens. The sound, the vibration, the whole process weakens as you age very quickly. It is weakening even faster than eyesight. You think eyesight weakens fast? No, hearing weakens faster. In most of the cases, no remedy in today's science. Maybe in the future. And this remedy cannot be a repair. You can't repair. This remedy can be in the form of genetic changes. That means they do something to you and your children will then become immune to this aging process. Scientists are looking at these ways of changing genetics so that we don't age so fast, right? But repair is not possible in this case. So this is really what happens there with sound. Now we take a look at touch receptors under the skin. Basically, there's one type of touch receptor that senses temperature. Another type of touch receptor senses vibration or movement. Another type of touch receptor senses pain. Another type of touch receptor senses pressure. And it is the combination of all this, the construction of all this, the sankhara of all this put together that produce the sensation that now I have touched something, right? So the saññā is the sensation of each of these nerve cells sending signals to the brain, which then processes, and now we get the perception of touching an object. Is it solid? Is it liquid? Is it hot? Is it cold? Is it moving? Right? Is there a flow of current? Right? And is it vapor? Whether we touch, whether it's water vapor? Is it gas? Right? Or is it moving? Is there a wind blowing? Right? All this is because of the construction of all the different sensations. So saññā is the sensation, the construction produces perception, viññāña. Right? So now all these different sensations, all the different saññā and Vedana come together and enter the brain. And there are 5 of these senses. And here I have put in also the Pali words that explain what kind of sensations. Some of you may recognize 1 or 2 words that are the same as bhasa, right? Rupa, right? Mental image. The sense of taste, Rasa. Now, can you tell me Bahasa Malaysia has no connection with Sanskrit? Rasa is taste, right? So you can see some of these connected words, right? So you have all the different sensations coming in, being constructed, and this construction actually conglomerates or mixes all of them together. And the process that does that is cognition, mano, the sixth sense. So the sixth sense is the one that puts it all together. Putting it all together, and when it puts it all together, it also refers to memory of past experiences to try to interpret what it is. It's all happening at the same time. Constructing it together to form the big picture, at the same time referring to memory of past experience to try to explain what is this big picture. What is it that I have seen? Is it a mineral, a bottle of mineral water or a glass of mineral water? So all these referring to past and present in order to interpret what was seen. So that is construction, producing vijnana, and then the mental image arises at the same time. It's all happening at the same time. It's not like one after another. It's not like that. It's not sequential. Bhante has pointed out, it is antecedental concurrence. It depends on one another, but it is happening almost simultaneously. Right? It depending on one another. One condition gives rise to another condition, but the two conditions are happening at the same time. So that is what it is. Now we go to page 118 of the old version, and then 125 of the Mahindarama version, where Bhante pointed out, this construction process or sankhara is a mental activity. The result of this activity of construction is the formation of the mental images, which are perceived, right? Vijnana. What has been perceived is vijnana, perception. From moment to moment, every mental image, rupa, that arises, fades away. That means it arises and fades away. So in other words, it's continuously happening. Moment to moment, it's arising and fading away, arising and fading away, arises and fades away, to be replaced by another mental image that arises. This happens in a continuous manner, a perpetual manner, right? Making us feel the continuity to be seen as though there is existence. Because it's happening continuously, we sense, oh, everything exists. But it doesn't. It's rising and falling, rising and falling, rising and falling. Billions and billions of times every second. We don't realize it, but we think it exists. I touch this object, this object exists. But while I'm holding to this object, hundreds of millions of touch-sensitive receptors under my skin is sending sensations to the brain continuously, hundreds of millions of times every second. At the same time as I'm looking at it, hundreds of millions of light-sensitive cells of that, all the pixels being picked up, sending to the brain, and there it produces the image that I am touching this mouse. So in other words, it's not touching the mouse. Right? The touch is not producing the mental image. It's the conglomerate of everything coming together, producing this image. Since a multiplicity of objects are present, so in other words, we look around as though there are many different objects, right? A multiplicity of objects are present in a complex mental image. A differentiation between one object and another object becomes necessary in the process of perception. In vijnana, in the perception, we try to interpret object by object, right? We need to differentiate. Vijnana refers to the big picture, and that is a correct translation. Vijnana means big picture. Now, the word vijnana is often translated as consciousness. Again, from a scientific perspective, it is not consciousness. The word consciousness at the same time there is no universal, unanimous agreement on the meaning. Some people say consciousness is the awareness of what you have seen, heard, smell, taste and touch. Now, if that is the definition of consciousness, yeah, then it's correct. Vijnana is consciousness in that sense. The awareness of what you have seen, heard, smelled, taste, and touch. But most scientists are explaining consciousness beyond that level. They talk about consciousness as being aware of the self in the world, aware of the self relative to the environment. And that is a different kind of consciousness. That is no longer talking about vijnana. Vijnana is a very primitive, simple version. This awareness of self in the world goes way beyond that, which we can talk about in a future forum. Right? So that's what it is. So these three parts of mental experiences, vijnana is the first part that arises whenever any other sense organ is being stimulated. So Bhante has pointed out that vijnana is the process of perception giving rise to perceptions. What is perceived through sense organs? Mano is the cognitive process, the interpretation of the perception, giving meaning to what was perceived. And chitta is the affective process, arousal of emotion leading to mental proliferation and personalizing that experience with the notion there is a self to be affected. Because the body basically is picking up all these sensations, channeling all these sensations to the brain to be processed, and then the mind, which is the activity of the brain, right, then begins to form the idea that there is existence. And then, because of that, we begin to personalize what we have experienced. So, we'll talk more about that personalizing next time. Right? We'll finish off with the basic process of sensation and feeling. So, in a flowchart manner, I will show you here, activities in the environment will stimulate our 5 sense organs. And when that 5 sense organ is being stimulated, then Pañca-khandha arises with Vedana, Saññā, Sankhara, Vijnana, and Rupa. And basically this Vijnana is the result of construction. Then there is a perception. What have I seen? What did I see, hear, smell, taste, and touch? And at the same time, Saññā, right, the sensation actually triggers the mano. So Saññā triggers the mano, and this is a very important aspect of Bhante's teaching. This connects with Bhante's explanation of Paticca-samuppada. So I'm going to explain that towards one of the future forums, a scientific explanation of Paticca-samuppada. That it is Saññā that triggers the arising of mano. And then we have this mental image of the big picture of what we have seen. And at the same time, with this vijnana, the perception, we begin to interpret what was seen by referring to memory of past experiences. And this process is papancha, which is recognition. And the outcome of this recognition is the production of a concept, a Dhamma, right? Concept. Right? Dhamma here means concept. That is the concept of an entity identified as the dog, in this case, seeing the dog. Right? So then we give it a name, a label, nama. So nama, rupa. Rupa is the mental image. Nama is the label we give to that mental image. That is what nama rupa is about. Now, many people have translated rupa to mean objects, matter, material, and nama means mind. No. Nama is the mental process of giving a label to a mental image. That's what it is. So that is what Bhante has been trying to teach us. Nama is the mental process of assigning a name to an image that arises. If I see this, then my mind says, oh, camera. So camera is the nama. Seeing this, the mental image of this is the rupa. That's what it is. This is not the rupa. But many translators call the object as the rupa. So be aware that different translators have different ways of explaining and calling this the rupa and calling the mental process the nama. No. Nama is not just the mental process. Nama is the assigning of a name to the perception of what we have seen, heard, smelled, taste, and touch. So this happens when all the senses come together and the mano will then put it together. But when these senses come together, there is this perception of what was perceived through the sense organs, and it is being put together to form the big picture. And now the mano begins to interpret it, recognize it, right? And then producing concept, assigning nama to it, and that is conception. And Bhante has pointed out very clearly, perception and conception. Perception is what the sense organs have picked up and sensed. Conception is how the mano assigns meaning to what was seen. Now we go back to the same thing that I mentioned earlier on page 62. Now the first part. What we call an experience is a mental process of perception and conception that begins with the 5 sense bases and is carried to the brain as the 6th sense through nerve impulses. So that is what the Bhante has explained. So now in summary, what is Saññā? Saññā, Bhante translates clearly as sensation, not perception. Sensation is the stimulation of sense organ that triggers nerve impulses, and these are Saññā, the nerve impulses, sensation in the nervous system, and it is being carried to the brain. And in the case of seeing, the Saññā is the sensation refers to sensing of wavelength, color, or the intensity, brightness. So it's both wavelength and intensity, brightness of the light. In the case of hearing, it is the sensation refers to the sensing of air vibration frequency, pitch, high pitch, low pitch. Right? High pitch sound, squeaky high pitch sound, or low pitch sound like a drum, right? And amplitude, loudness, softness. If something is too loud, it irritates the nervous system. Right? Now I want to ask you one important thing. Liking or not liking is an emotional reaction. But the natural reaction is whether it irritates your nervous system. So loud noise will definitely irritate your nervous system, your ears. Soft noise, soft sound will soothe it. But why do some kids love loud music? They love loud music. They turn it up and enjoy it. You know, they like the sensation of agitation. Similarly, why do some people like to touch hot things? For us, touching something hot, we let it go. But some people like it. Why do some people like to hold on to ice? There are kids who love to play with ice. And yet when we hold on to ice, we want to throw it away. That throwing away is an emotional reaction, not Vedana. The Vedana is that when you pick up ice, the sensation is irritating. When you touch something hot, the sensation is irritating. But some people like the irritation. Liking the irritation is an emotional reaction, not Vedana. Liking or not liking cold drinks or hot drinks. Some kids love cold drinks. Now, if you wake up in the morning and you take one glass of ice cold water, you get brain freeze and you don't like it. But some kids love it. My daughter loves it. She loves to drink cold drinks every morning, and I've been trying to teach her not to drink so much cold drinks. But she loves cold drinks. She loves to drink things with ice. That loving it is a reaction, tanha, emotional reaction. So in other words, when you like something and you don't like something, that is not Vedana. That is tanha, emotional reaction, which is commonly translated as craving. So I hope you understand the difference now, Vedana and Saññā. So, Saññā and Vedana. Now, Vedana is the feeling. It is basically sensation is always accompanied by feeling. In the case of seeing, sight, feeling refers to how the nervous system is irritated by long wavelengths, the red, yellow, and orange light, and high intensity bright light. At the same time, the nervous system is soothed by short wavelength, blue-green light, and low-intensity, dim, soft light. Right? And in the case of hearing, feeling refers to how the nervous system is irritated by high frequency, high pitch sound, and also large amplitude or very loud sound, whereas it is soothed by low frequency, right, and soft, mellow sound. You know, almost all the radio announcers of any professional radio, they will employ people with low pitch voice to speak. You know, notice all the good DJs, they have good, nice, low pitch voice, right? Patrick Teo and all that. You don't find any male DJ with a very high pitch voice, because high pitch voice is very irritating to the nervous system. Yeah. That's why it is. So, word of warning to the ladies who have high-pitched voice. Realize that your high-pitched voice irritates people when you speak. Naturally. So, and one person, a few people in history, very famous people, one former Prime Minister of England with a high-pitched voice when she was an MP, when she was elected as the Prime Minister, she actually went for voice training to lower her pitch. Margaret Thatcher. There's another one who I also picked up when she was young. She had not a very high-pitched voice, but a medium-pitched voice. But as she aged, her husband was a very smart guy, ex-president of US, got her to be trained to lower her voice. She's now the Democratic nominee for US president. So these people have low-pitched voice. Why? They know that if they speak with high-pitched voice, it irritates people. Right? So that is basically Saññā and Vedana. I hope this has helped. If you are able to, maybe some of you will understand everything I have explained now. That's very good. If you truly understand it, you don't even need to practice Vipassana meditation. This is Vipassana. Understanding this, the rising and the falling, and how all this construction is happening inside your head, that all that. So I hope this has been helpful. Thank you very much. Okay, so we now open to questions. If anybody has any questions, please approach the microphone if you have any question on today's presentation on Saññā Vedana. Yeah, use the mic because I need to.
First of all, thank you for a very detailed explanation. I learned a lot. You mentioned a lot about Mano. How do Chitta, in the whole loop, you showed just now the entire process, where does Chitta positioned? Okay. Just for my own clarification.
Okay, for this evening, I didn't go into the balancing between Mano and Chitta.
But just talk about Mano.
If you're interested, I'll show you now. I will bring another presentation.
Okay. Then I just have a second question also.
I'll just show you here. Let me see. Just in answer to your question. Where does Chitta come in? Okay, let's take a look at this whole process. Right, this is a more complete process. So, environmental activities stimulate the sense organ, and then we have the perception, see, hear, smell, taste, and touch, and then we begin to interpret it by referring to categorized memory of past. Now, with this interpretation, at the same time, now this is not depending on the interpretation alone, this is at the same time, the sensations, the Saññā has a Vedana to go with it, and this Vedana is pleasant or unpleasant, irritating the nervous system or soothing the nervous system. And the Chitta reacts to it. If it is something that irritates the nervous system or soothes the nervous system, the Chitta actually triggers the arousal of biochemical reactions in the body. And these biochemical reactions in the body actually depends on whether the sensation is pleasant or unpleasant. And this sensation will then cause tension in the body, and you will then feel it, right? And this sensation is then felt. And this is, in most of the time, this sensation causes some kind of a stress, even if it is a pleasant thing, right? Some people, when you experience something pleasurable, that sensation is also a bit of a stress because it causes changes in the body. So this is the first reaction of the chitta, reacting to the sensation, reacting to the Vedana itself, whether it is pleasant or unpleasant, right? And the chitta is actually a bit more complicated than that. With this reaction, it goes further. When the biochemical reactions happen, it causes changes in the body. So I won't go into too much detail. Changes in the body feels very unpleasant. So when this happens, the body is feeling unpleasant, the chitta reacts again. Now this time, this reaction is emotional. This reaction is tanha, the second time round. In other words, reacting to the bodily changes becomes tanha. Reacting to the sensation that you have just experienced, that is Vedana. Vedana is pleasant or unpleasant, now causing bodily changes. Hormones are released, the body starts to change. Now the chitta reacts. Here it is tanha. That's why some people like the sensation of something hot, some people hate the sensation of something hot. So now the chitta is aroused the second time round in a different way. This is emotional arousal. And that is where memory, imagination arises, and then the mind begins to wander off and starts to go into all kinds of mood changes and so on, and disturbs our rational thinking. We can no longer think rationally. And that causes us, the mind, to be torn. So this is the emotional reaction, domanassa, right? So that is how chitta is a bit more complicated than just reacting to pleasant, unpleasant. Pleasant, unpleasant starts off the whole emotional process by causing hormones to be released. But after that, the body begins to react, and then the mind begins to go into mental proliferation, and that is when we go into emotional mood, and then we become reactive.
So in short, like say you have a baby just born, right?
Yeah.
He doesn't have much associative thoughts yet because he doesn't.
Associative thoughts,
but
correct.
So the first reaction that the baby experiences when you say you touch and it gets very hot or cold, that is an actual Vedana.
Yes,
right,
the touch, and the baby doesn't. You won't find babies liking something that is unpleasant. No, but you will find teenagers liking things that are unpleasant. Because of associations. But the baby has no association. When the baby is first born, the baby will not like anything that is unpleasant. Right? Loud noise, high-pitched noise, they will react to it. They will not like it. But some people like high-pitched noise because of association and maybe conditioning, programming. They like to listen to high-pitched sounds. Some people prefer low-pitched sounds, so that's all because of conditioning.
Question number 2 is, you mentioned something about mental construction, which you explained clearly, and then you occasionally mention randomly about karmic construction.
Karmic construction, I'm not talking about it here.
Yeah.
Karmic construction, okay, I'll show you karmic construction. So again, perception, interpretation, then, like I said, it causes, first, it is whether it is pleasant, unpleasant, Vedana, and then it triggers the arousal, triggers the biochemical reaction. Now it is felt as some bodily sensation, and now memory, imagination, expectation arises, lobha, dosa, moha. That means we like something pleasant, or we don't like something unpleasant, and so on, and that disturbs the mind. And that is when we begin to decide we want to do something. Chetana, intention. Chetana is intention. And then we take action. We actually do something. That is karma. And then comes the consequence of what we do. Vipaka. These three always go together. Chetana, karma, vipaka. Chetana is the volition, the intention of wanting to do something, to change your situation. Karma is the actual action you do, and that is the construction. The Chetana itself constructs the karma. See, you may want to do something, but you don't actually do it. That is still karma. You think you want to hurt that person, maybe upset you. Now you think you want to punch that person. You're just thinking, I want to punch him, but you didn't punch him. You still have bad karma. So Chetana is also karmic construction. It begins at Chetana. Karmic construction begins here. So now you can see this is volition. Chetana, another word for Chetana is volition. In fact, my new slides all say volition. This is an old one. Chetana is volition. Karma is the actual action. And then when you take action, you create consequences. That is vipaka. So that will come back to haunt you sometime in the future. Or immediately, depending on what it is. You punch that person, and that person is stronger than you, and in fact more violent than you. He punch you back. That is consequence of your action. So karmic construction comes after chitta is aroused, not during the time of Vedana. Vedana arouses chitta. Now understand this. Vedana arouses chitta. Chitta constructs karma. Karmic construction comes because of chitta. Arahants have purified their mind that the chitta does not start. The chitta is never started. This is why Arahants can never have karmic construction. Arahants do not construct karma. Right? They can sense. They can sense. They have cognition. Yes, they have. They can sense. They can see, hear, smell, taste, and touch. It's just that whether it's pleasant, unpleasant, they don't get affected. Now, I think some of you may have heard me talk about this thing called the amygdala in the brain. The amygdala gets aroused and then begins to trigger off the biochemical reaction. So all the biochemical reaction is because the amygdala was aroused. I believe that when you reach the level of Arahant, your amygdala is completely stopped, dulled. The amygdala does not react. That's why the Arahant does not have any emotions, right? Because the amygdala is at the center of the emotion. So that's why Arahants do not have emotions. Arahants do not create karma because their chitta do not get aroused. They don't react to pleasant or unpleasant Vedana. No reaction at all. They don't like or dislike something. This is why if Buddha has taught that for all the disciples to renounce and not like or dislike anything. Live in a neutral life. Don't like or dislike things. Just live as is. Don't like or dislike, because that is training the mind not to react. Okay? I hope that answers your question.